Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, before we discuss the topic, we're going to let our guests in alphabetical order according to the word machine introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with you, Miss Chloe Garner.
Hi, I'm Chloe Garner. I write science fiction, fantasy, and all manner of speculative fiction, and I'm really excited to be talking steampunk tonight.
Outstanding. And what about you, Mr. Isaac Kraft? Can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers?
Hello, I'm Isaac Kraft. I write science fiction and fantasy, and currently I'm writing young adult fiction.
Why would you do that to yourself?
Don't let him give you crap. It's great.
No.
I didn't say the writing or the story wasn't great, but I'm told the audience could be hit or miss. From the craft side, I've heard that's dog eat dog world over there. But hey, if you're happy with it, we're happy with it. And we're going to move on to Miss Jenna S. Brown, who sometimes cosplays as Jenna Ray or any number of unknown pseudonyms, which she graces the page with. Jenna, can you introduce yourself?
Fantastic. Yes, I am Janet S. Brown, also known as Jenna Ray Jadelyn Asher, and can't talk about that one. Anyway, I write science fiction and fantasy under Jenna Ray, and dabble with all sorts of steampunky goodness. So this is going to be fun.
Oh, freaking standing. And next we got Mr. Jay Barnson.
Hi, I'm Jay Barnson. Former life was video game developer, and now I've been writing for quite a few years. My first published short story actually was a steampunk short story, but I do speculative fiction, mostly fantasy. So
nice. Next we have Miss Jenna Wren of the Three Ravens fame.
My name is Jenny Wren. I write science fiction, fantasy, steampunk. Wherever a fun story goes, if it's fun story, if it's fun characters, I'm probably going to be there on the sidelines causing trouble. And steampunk is my love, so I'm really excited to get into it and see what all we have to say.
Nice. And last but not least, we have Miss Terry K. Job of the Voices, the many voices.
Oh, yes, of course. I am Terry K. Job, audiobook narrator and occasional writer of fantasy, a little bit of sci-fi, and definitely not steampunk, so I'm here for the lulz.
Hey,
Nice.
These topics, you don't have to be a writer of the thing, just a lover of them. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, because obviously we've talked about plenty of topics I don't write about, but I enjoy it, so we talk about it. All right. The next part of the introduction, dear listener, dear viewer, is how we first found them. We actually all met on in an airship. We were en route to save the steam paladins from the clutches of the evil automatons. Keep a long story short, we won. They died. Moving on. And we've also had everyone on the panel has been here before because we like our returning guests. So no religion questions today, other than to talk about what drink do you think is the most steampunk? I'm still saying coffee works for steampunk.
Tea.
I got it.
Go on.
Tea has a power behind it. Yep.
Yeah, okay. I gotta say tea.
Moonshine.
Oh, I like.
I just you think about the whole steampunk aesthetic, and you cannot tell me that 3/4 of those engines are not running a still somewhere. I mean, you look at the tubes and the wires and the dripping. There's moonshine there, man.
Ooh, how about this? Hot chocolate in one of those fancy tea cups.
Ooh, I'm there.
The teacups, man. Just the wall of teacups that has a real steampunk vibe to it.
All right. I could go with the hot chocolate. The tea, I guess, makes sense because the herbs but bean water is sacred, and I'm gonna die on that hill. All right. Although now I think you talk about moonshine, and if you make the moonshine wrong, you could literally blind yourself because stuff gets in stuff. It's bad for you. So now every time I see someone with a monocle, I'm gonna think, moonshine incident. All right, now we know what happened.
No, that's when you know that they're the engineer.
I love it.
He tested the moonshine; it was not approved. All right, so first we're going to talk about what is steampunk. So I'm going to go with the standard for the podcast, we always revert back to the Wikipedia because it's sort of crowdsourced as an answer. It's not always perfect, but it's a good starting point. So steampunk is a subgenre of science fiction that incorporates retrofuturistic technology and aesthetics inspired by, but not limited to, 19th century industrial steam-powered machinery. The works of steampunk are often alternative history to the Victorian era. Wow, I can speak today, people. Alternative history for the Victorian era or the American Wild West, where steam power remains in mainstream use, or in a fantasy world that similarly employs use of power by steam. That's a generic sort of explanation for it. It's basically neo-Victorian retrofuturisms, but did that work for everyone, or did you want to expand on it, add to it?
I found myself wondering what an Asian steampunk would look like, and just was completely off in a rabbit hole the whole time.
That would be awesome. That is what that would be, is awesomeness.
And I could quibble over science fiction versus fantasy as well, because especially if you're relying upon, now no longer, valid scientific principles of like the ether and stuff like that is any different from doing, fire, earth, air, and water. And there's plenty of steampunk stories out there involving fantasy elements from, mages and vampires and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
It is really hard to bucket. I mean, I think Wiki they kind of got going off of the tea analogy. I mean, it's really kind of like watered down, simplified version. It's probably the hardest feel or tone to really bucketize, because you ask everybody what steampunk is and everyone's going to give you a different answer. It's the feel, it's the aesthetic, it's the tech, it's the interactions of the characters. I mean, it's all going to be different. So you ask anybody what's steampunk and you're going to get a plethora of answers, which is kind of what makes it fun.
It is. I mean, it is. I think what you said. It's a feel. It's an aesthetic. It's, I always looked at it as like it's fantasy set in kind of a Victorian era-esque instead of good old, fashioned medieval, Arthurian times or something like that. It's like, okay, let's just take the same, spec-fic fantasy or whatever and move it forward a few hundred years. But yeah, for me, it is that feel. It's that Jules Verne style, polished wood, craftsmanship, brass, and of course, clockwork.
Is a lot of it for me.
H.G. Wells is another one. Yep.
Well, and you can expand that. A lot of the Weird West stuff, that's steampunk US.
Yes.
And as far as the timeline goes, it meshes. Because you can get your Victorian, Victorians, ninjas, and cowboys all at the same time if you look at the timeline just right.
And samurai.
So you can get steampunk, and you can draw it across cultures. So you get the Weird West. You do get there's anime that harkens back to that kind of aesthetic that pulls the Asian.
Ninja Turtles.
What was that?
I want to see steampunk Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh yeah,
that's
that'd
just
be awesome.
Asking for it. Yep.
Steampunk superheroes. But you got that with like the Rocketeer and things like that. You get the steampunk superheroes. So it is one of those genres where you can cross with lots of other things and it can dabble. And Isaac, you haven't said anything yet, so I think you should. Because I'm mean.
It's arguable that some of the Lovecraftian stories could be steampunk. Within the same era, same time period. There have been some Weird West that did play on things with tentacles and unseen in dark pits and places. They won't tell you what it is, but and then how in the world are they going to combat stuff like that in that age? And it usually winds up with something having to do with steam and gears, and also the argument that maybe alchemy is something, maybe something similar, only instead of science. Only how far can you push the boundary of science before it becomes something else?
Well said.
Well, and other thing is Victorian era seances were extremely popular as well, and that can be ripe material that I haven't seen so much of. But I did want to comment for Jana. I think Rocketeer, that's probably more diesel punk, which is going to be a totally different podcast.
Yeah, it's like
That's
this.
a thing too.
Yes,
That is a thing.
Oh, that's the thing.
And Atom Punk.
Atom Punk, Cyberpunk. Put anything you want in front of punk, it's a thing.
Yeah, no, the number of punks terrify me because I cannot differentiate, and I know that about myself, and it's all just sort of this wild west of make up your technology and run with it, and I'm here for it. But what word do I use? I don't know.
Diesel punk is like steampunk's grittier cousin that lives on the wrong side of the tracks. And is all smudgy and stuff. Jay talked about the polished wood and all of that kind of stuff and the brass and whatever. Diesel punk's the other side of that, where it's gritty and it's oily and it's combustion engines and smoke and all those kind of neat things. But it's lots of fun. And it's mostly marketing terms anyway. It's all about, what does your audience want? And then you call it that.
Which is really weird, actually, because when you... Go ahead, Terry, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was going to veer off a little bit. Please, go ahead.
You will find this is my soapbox. This is my gearbox. Not a gearbox.
Then let her rip.
Oh, sure, you heard that. I've been greenlit. I am off the hook. No, but that's one of the things about it that I think makes it so hard to market steampunk, because everybody hears Cyberpunk 2077. They hear Cyberpunk and steampunk and atom punk and diesel punk, and everyone goes, well, what the fire truck is any of this? What is it? Do we like it? Well, yes, we like it, but what do we like? So I think kind of with the proclivity to super subgenre oneself as it does, I think that makes it even harder to market and even harder to explain to people, as we see, as a genre. Go, well, do you like diesel? Do you like steampunk? Well, yeah, don't you? Well, I don't know. What the hell is it? So I almost think it's self-defeating, the gears winding itself too tightly.
It turns into a writer thing to differentiate among ourselves and use an insider language, like the different styles of fantasy, where those terms are not helpful to a reader that isn't keeping up with the cutting edge of evolution of switching things in and out and making new genres. And to call it all just punk, I'm in,
Let's do it.
A lot of it has that same sort of solve the problem and save the world or whatever the stakes are. And these intrepid people out solving these issues. And there's a lot of shared ground there that is the genre when you aren't looking at the specific technology involved.
But it's usually weird technology. It's bringing in a technology that we don't look at and go, oh, yeah, that's totally normal. And that's, I think, part of that fun with the aesthetic is it is technology is important to their solutions. It's very important to their solutions, but it's a different kind of technology. It's pushing the whole cyberpunk with jacking into the net and doing that kind of thing. Steampunk with your wings and your gears and whatever. It's important. Dirigibles. You see my little background here. My Cody guy. So yeah, the technology is important, but it isn't. It has to be a technology that isn't standard for us. Go ahead, Jay.
Oh, I was listening to you. So whatever it was, I was just. I think. I mean, I love mixing genres. I mean, that's the thing. And so a lot of the genre stuff where it originated is, if you like X, you might like Y, and so we just kind of go from there. For steampunk, it's like, if you like, this sort of flavor, here's something similar. And it does mean that, you have to get kind of to be into an enthusiast level before, the difference between, gas lamp fantasy and steampunk really make a difference.
Well,
so I looked that up.
Oh, go ahead. Go.
So I looked that up. Gaslamp fantasy, also called gaslight fantasy, was considered steampunk's magically inclined cousin. So that's where they would classify the fantasy side of steampunk. Although most people that you talk to would probably just call it all the same thing. I'm not sure where that line is, but doing a quick Google search of the different concepts, because Looks like we have future episode ideas here with the Atom Punk and DC Punk.
Oh, this is a rabbit hole with no end.
Yeah.
That's what our topics are.
No, but for me, the big thing I look for is just kind of the little signature parts. It's you do something with airships. I don't even care if it's steampunk or not. You got airships and you've got that coolness. I'm there. I'm ready. You can call it Final Fantasy or steampunk. I'm good. Or whatever the stuff Jim Butcher is doing. The Aeronauts Windless.
Aeronauts Windless. I just got the second one. It's sitting in my TV Red pile at the top because it's going to skip the line.
Same here with the pink cover that I just do not understand.
I saw that one. What the dude are you doing?
Yeah. That's the interesting thing is covers in this genre really matter, because you were saying, everybody thinks that it's something different. And there's a lot of stuff that I pick up based on, does that cover look like the kind of adventure that I want to go on? Because in steampunk, I'm expecting an adventure. I'm expecting that intrepid crew. And the covers are a big thing to me to be able to say, this is kind of my thing. And so when I saw the bright pink covers with the Aeronauts Windless, I'm like, what are you doing? This is so off market from what you had before that had the dirigible. It's like, you're missing your target audience, because we're looking for that artistic aesthetic that to us says, this is steampunk. This is the thing that I want.
I'm looking at like Regency fantasy romance.
So
Sorry.
I've read one steampunk novel, and because I was curious about this genre for book review purposes, and unfortunately the author's model was his spouse, who he divorced, so he didn't have his cover model anymore, and they never finished the series. Is that a problem that steampunk has that some other genres do? A lot of epic fantasy gets abandoned and never finished, and so people kind of leery about reading. Is that a problem, you think, in steampunk, or is that just a one-off that I happen to find? Because it's definitely a trend in the epic side of fantasy world.
When I first started writing, I really wanted to understand what steampunk was, because it felt like it had a lot of technical aspects to it that would be right up my alley. And I found a book of short stories of steampunk that were dabbling in all of the eras and all of the types of steampunk running around, all the way from some of the grimdark stuff out there that's steampunk, up through the really lighthearted traipsing around in everybody wears gears on their hats. And they're charming little short stories, and they don't require scope to be excellent steampunk, where epic fantasy requires that big construction of scope. You can put scope into a steampunk and then abandon it because it didn't work out for you, but I'm not sure that I would call that a feature of the genre.
Okay.
Yeah, I think every genre has that, where there's stuff that gets abandoned either because it's not making money or because the author decides to do something else. So I think you caught a one-off. One of the weirdest ones that I ever read that did an aesthetically strange thing was Bone Shaker by Sherry Priest.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
It's a great book, but the first editions they put out of it were cream paper with brown text, and I wanted to kill somebody because my old eyes, I picked it up and I'm like, I can't read this. It was very aesthetic. It felt very, very steampunky, but there wasn't enough contrast, and I made myself blind trying to read the first 3 chapters, and finally I put it away and I sent it to the library and donated it, because here was this book I desperately wanted to read, but they had made such a strange aesthetic choice there that I couldn't read the thing. And it was years before I went back to it. And it was a great story.
Yeah.
But you lost me because brown text on cream paper, that was it. My brain was just done.
Over function.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of those that I'm like, that was not a good steampunk choice. It spoke steampunk. I opened it, and at first it was like, this is really clever. And then I tried to read it, and it was no longer clever. Now it was irritating.
Might be good for a title page, but good grief.
Yeah, the whole book.
Ooh.
So you had a question, Isaac? You can just join the chat. You don't have to type on the sidebar. Nobody can see those. We're gonna make you talk, Isaac. We will make you a talker. We will make you an extrovert by the time you're done with this podcast.
Or at least for the duration.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, found out I'm a natural introvert. when pressed. Not that I want to be, but still. Yeah. Earlier I was
working on that.
Yeah. Earlier I was looking at online, and I was surprised when online was saying Sherlock Holmes could be steampunk because of gadgets and goggles and magnifying glasses.
Yeah.
Qualify as
on how it's
steampunk.
applied, how it's implemented. But there have been very steampunk implementations of Sherlock Holmes, and they're fun.
Yep.
Well, I just think of Hound of the Baskervilles. What was it with phosphorus that was mixed into the furs, stuff like that? You know, so it's definitely got elements thereof, and yeah, I mean the Robert Downey Jr. Films seemed had a really strong feel there. So it could be done that way. It doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely saw some steampunk aesthetics in some of the my son has been watching the last Airbender series, the 2 versions of it.
Yep.
And it definitely had, because it's an earth element, like they used elements, earth, wind, whatever. So there's definitely been some steampunk elements there. I don't know that I'd call it a steampunk story, but you definitely saw some of the steam powered gadgets were a thing.
There were some episodes that were more steampunky than others. Like I think they went to one of the air temples.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking about too.
Yeah, you had all those people that were making the flying machines and had everything steam powered, and they were horrified because they destroyed mosaics.
Yeah,
but
the historian
some episodes had it more than others.
Fictional history piece too. So
yeah.
Well, and you got pieces like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which had the Victorian, the steampunk, and the paranormal. Van Helsing with Wolverine. Now I've just lost his name.
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman. Thank you. This was not his best movie ever, but it did have that fun combination of that time period, the paranormal, and the very steampunky kind of the way they're doing research. A lot of those have that feeling, that call back to, how does the Nautilus run? And that was tremendously fun.
Yeah.
Well, Peter Jackson also had one called Mortal Engines, which was mostly ignored, but I'd call that pretty steampunk.
Very.
Yep, I would, for sure. Sometimes I think it's an additional level of encouraged suspension of disbelief, because you have to look at a machine, whether you're reading it, and seeing it, or like watching and seeing it, and like Howl's Moving Castle, like not necessarily the book, but like the movie.
Yeah.
You look at it and you go, there's no way on this green earth those ships are going to fly with those little bitty propellers like spinning through the wings. But because it looks like it could, it does. So it's like an additional suspension of disbelief with the tech, which makes it cool. And I think that kind of plays to like people's gut a little bit. Like the kid that's like, yeah, it's going to be cool. It's going to, and that maybe is just what ties that steampunk feel to it. Going, I know that doesn't. My adult says that doesn't work. My inner kid says, "F you, it does."
Castle in the Sky by Miyazaki, one of my favorite movies of all time, and that would definitely be,
So the other part you run into is when you've got the visual aesthetic, so the manga, the anime, the TVs, the cartoons, whatever, like you've got the visual, so you can sort of see the gears. You don't necessarily have to watch it work, but it gives the appearance of functionality. You're good. I think it gets a little more complicated when you do it in a literary form, when you're writing, like you're reading it in paragraphs, because now you have to describe things a little bit more to set the scene with words. And sometimes you got to work a little harder to fake the funk if you want to make the unbelievable believable.
Definitely true. I was just, I know Jenny's probably written more in steampunk than I have, but I actually read several books on it, just trying to pull out there's one called The Victorian Internet that was talking about how all the things that we think are modern actually had equivalencies back in the era of, with the identity theft and fraud and weird stuff. There was a great, I think it was by Cheever. It was called, She was a Morse code operator, and she wrote kind of a romantic comedy that was hilarious with the two characters, and they couldn't actually, they're both telegraph operators. They couldn't talk to each other live. They get too shy, and they ended up like setting up like a line between where they were housing, and they were just tapping out messages because texting was a lot easier for them than talking. But it was great. It was fantastic stuff. But I think a lot of it is just kind of going in and trying to capture that, just the history. The cool thing with steampunk for me is that it is something that is recent enough that the modern person can relate to it. They may not know what a telegraph, or they may not know the details of, telegraph or any of these other things, but they at least recognize it. They feel it's modern enough. They feel comfortable with it. You don't have to go and explain all the, much more elaborate stuff if you're talking about pre-Renaissance or Dark Age, this culture. But however, it is removed enough from living memory that you can totally lie your ass off and people can buy it, because nobody knows how a telegraph, except for a few specialists, how a telegraph office actually operated from day to day. They never have had to deliver that. And you can just start making up your own stuff. And then, of course, you're doing science fiction or fantasy, and it's you get to throw in your own mix in there. And it's really, for me, it's just trying to, I do making the list and what are the elements that I want to bring in. But, you are absolutely right. It's a lot harder because you don't have that immediate visual that you can hang on. You almost have to, convince your reader, yeah, this is steampunk. But you don't really have to. Just write a good story. But anyway, that's
one thing actually that I did. I kind of it's not cheated, but what I did was I went online and I ordered original copies of the Scientific American magazines from the 1800s.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Like, there's this website out there. It's this absolutely heathenistic website where they sell books and magazines from the 1800s to be destroyed. I'm like, you all.
Whoa. Why would they do that?
For you. So,
why would you torture me and tell me this?
Believe me, it tortures me all the time. And then I'm like, I must go out and rescue these books from the 1800s because this is the first source. So I have stacks of Scientific America, like the original copies of those magazines, newspapers from the 1800s, and it explains the new tech. It explains everything that was real. And I'm like, well, shit, I don't have to invent the wheel because they already invented the wheel. I just have to adapt it. And Hillbilly tried to call me out on it and won. And the novel that he's got sitting in queue, he goes, well, this doesn't work. I said, bullshit, it does. Here it is. Boom, look. I said, April 27th, 1988. Boom, here it is.
I love it.
So you don't often get to pull one over on Hillbilly. So when you do, take it. But I tried to do that because I was like, okay, there's all this opportunity for tech and my brain can go any, which way. I was like, what was really there? Because as you said, Jay, if it's real, then people recognize it, but it's far enough away that you can apply your hand wavium and it becomes anything you want it to be, but there's a touch of real to it because it really existed. So yeah, I have a very large stack of those magazines that are in acid-proof paper.
Thank you for doing your part to save the words.
Yeah.
Yes, always.
All the words.
It's the suspension of disbelief. If you get them with the setting, if you get them with the characters, if you get them with that kind of thing, then, space opera is the same way. There's a whole lot of hand wavium that goes on with, what actually is a dilithium crystal. Nobody cares. You can do whatever you want with it because it's about the characters and it's about the journey. And you can do that with steampunk. And Firefly brings in some very steampunky aesthetic.
Yes.
And I think about there's a scene where Kaylee's been shot and they've got to do things with the engines. And she's telling them, over there, do that switch and pull that thing. And not a one of us goes, engines shouldn't work that way. Because we're in the moment and they have to do this thing. And so, of course, make Jane crawl up and do the engines and pull the switch and the thing. That's how it works because I bought it. I didn't care about, the way an engine for a Firefly spaceship works really shouldn't. No. Do the thing, Jane. Do it.
Yeah.
So
just pull the switch.
Yes. Go into that suspension. And once I've got you with the characters, then if I hand wave him the technology, they'll come with me. As long as it's not way out there, they'll come with me.
I think there's another hack to it as a writing medium where you're developing that technology and you can build it step by step and put it in with the details of it without it being just excessive background world building, where the way that Terry Pratchett's technology books go, where you're building a clacks and all of the white and black panels and everybody's watching it, the details of how do you build this out become part of the plot rather than info dump to try to make it feel technical. And I think that that's a really successful path for steampunk in text.
That's also how you can tell bad steampunk.
I was gonna say, didn't H.G. Wells, and he have, what was it called, Cavitite or something like that? Was like a lighter or anti-gravity, MacGuffin or unobtainium device to fly to the moon. I was just saying, one of the things that actually got me with again, the first steampunk story I wrote, I had an issue because the editor was familiar enough with telegrams, and I had punctuation in my telegraph messages because one of the key parts was encrypted messages or encoded messages inside there. And she said, I thought that you didn't have punctuation in telegrams. You use the word stop. And, I actually knew the whole, story there. I was like, well, that was because they had telegraph operators from the war where they would use, the word halt to mean stop, and they would use the period at the beginning and the end of the message to let them know that they got the full orders at wartime. I think it was during Civil War. And is where it started, but World War I especially. And I said, but yeah, you look at American Morse code, we got punctuation there. And she's like, well, okay, now I know it, you know it, but the readers who have ever seen old movies or something like that are going to think that that's wrong. And so we ended up having to rewrite the messages so they didn't have any punctuation in them, just so it wouldn't raise the hackles of a few readers who knew some but not enough, and which was going to be most of them. So anyway, it was just, again, something that's not in living memory, or or that part I guess is, but where people can get tripped up over things that they don't know.
Or they think
but assume they think they know.
Anybody who's seen some of the grammatical edits that people put in the comments of a book review, and you look at them, I'm like, well, according to page blah, 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 of the Chicago Manual of Style, you, sir, are an idiot.
By the way, you're just an idiot.
You used to be able to respond to comments on the Amazon's book review section, and there were some interesting and hysterical back and forths. But then I guess people started spamming each other, and it got ugly, and they took away our fun.
People on the internet behaved badly.
Shocking!
What is
Shocking!
the steampunk equivalent of the internet? Would it be Morse code and the telegraph?
I would say so, because in a lot of cases it was. I mean, they had, like I said, they had there's one called there's a book, nonfiction called The Victorian Internet, and it was talking, it talks about the high-tech jobs, laying the first transatlantic cables. We had fax machines in 1867, I think it was. So yeah, you could see a future possibly if they weren't having to run over the same lines as the telegraph companies, and telegram companies, didn't want to have handwritten messages over their lines, so they made it prohibitively expensive to license it. But you could see a potential past where fax machines and even sending kind of digitized photographs were possible. Also, William Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer, and Bruce Sterling, they wrote one. It's not really, it's more alternate history, but there's one called The Difference Engine that the two of them wrote. That was, said, what if the computer revolution actually happened in the 1840s, I think, with Babbage's computer, which they have now built for museums and proved that, yes, this computer could have worked. What if the computer revolution actually started a good 100 years earlier? What would that have done to things? I mean, that's definitely that's alt history more than science fiction or fantasy. That could have happened.
I'm thinking about, you could do like classic era, like with Leonardo da Vinci and some of his machines, could have, if they had been built and made, some of the specs even say they're functional. If you'd actually been able to build them, could have fallen into that steampunk sort of vibe, given how they were made. And then I'm just thinking you could also get steampunk in almost a Civil War setting, because if you look at the mechanics of the Handley, which was one of the first submarines, there's a lot of steam and water power to it. So that could be some fun fertile ground to play with as well.
No, we have to come up with a new punk for those, though. They have to be there has to be a whole new kind of punk.
I was going to say that's still
colonies.
No, that's still in the Victorian era. Actually, Tracy Hickman and Dan Willis did a book where it was like, the Confederacy, it had like the Union had dragons and the Confederacy had the airships. And anyway, it was that was, I'm trying to remember the name of that series. But yeah, counts.
All right. Well, we're going to pause for a moment while I shamelessly show for the man and the woman behind this lovely novel.
Are you searching for an epic new fantasy book to read? Well, look no further. Try out Spring for Spears, where the fate of the Wolf Riders falls on an outcast. Astrid would give anything to be one of the Ulfsark, the fearless warriors who ride giant Amarak wolves. Like her ancestors, she yearns for the soul-deep bond with the wolf, the connection, the union, a chance to prove her worth and honor her mother's legacy. Yet, she's never heard the wolf song. And with each passing year, it's likely she never will. Except Astrid refuses to accept her fate. Then, an encounter with a nature spirit and a foreign princess dashes her last hope and changes everything. Will Astrid save a fragile peace and embrace her destiny? Or will her dreams of the wolf song fade to distant lands? Join Astrid and friends on a thrilling new fantasy adventure in A Spring for Spears, the first novel in the Wolf Song Saga, a series by best-selling, award-winning authors Katie Cross and Derek Allen Sidaway.
We try not to be jealous and hate her too much, Katie. She does her own audiobooks, and then she writes them crazy, designs her own websites, and like basically out Amazon. It's just not fair, really. But thank you for sticking with us for that commercial interlude. We really appreciate you coming back as we get nerdy about steampunk. So, Isaac, do you think there are any common themes in steampunk?
Yes, I believe so. You already mentioned earlier about airships as a common theme. Also, gears and steam-powered. One of the things that I've written in one of the short stories for the Corner Scribblers involved a teleporter into alternate dimensions, and the source for how it was able to do this was through twin cylinders filled with water and wires and electricity, and that's just one example. There's other things out there, like our airships able to float. But yes, I think there's a common theme that you're looking for with steampunk.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else want to jump into that? What they think common themes are?
Oh, I'd say there's at least to me, a common theme of that really high intelligence, like being able to use all those elements of steam and gears and these new technologies and put them together in new ways that solve whatever problem pops up in the story. Mm-hmm. So it's that aha type of thing.
Clever triumphs over brute force.
Yeah, exactly.
In the steampunk universe. And someone who is working for their own perspective and an individualist sort of a take on right and wrong has the power to overcome a large institutional evil and the almost David and Goliath sense of if you're right and you're willing to go for it, you've got a very good chance of winning out in a steampunk universe.
Well, and the mad scientist kind of gets to come out of the closet and be in the forefront instead of being, yes, and we go to the old wide mad scientist guy and we get something and then we go fight the monsters. He's right there because steampunk really plays to that aesthetic that lets the smart person, the experimental person, the person who's willing to go beyond the bounds of normal things, and makes them the core of the story instead of being the back part of the story.
A lot of them have like the individualism, triumphing against the very static structure, and part of that I think is due to, in real life, how we're going away from the agrarian economy where the landlords, the nobles owned everything, to where the merchant class and so forth had a lot more strength, and a lot of the stories kind of reflect that, where as the one guy just kind of, or girl often, abandoning convention and the restrictions of society and carving their own path.
Yeah, it also seems, at least, it almost seems like where some stories focus on a single class trait. We've got clever, we've got brute strength, we've got all these different things, which is great. There's very much a place, there's very much a need for that. But I kind of feel like sometimes with like the steampunk, looking at that umbrella, you get to be both. You get to be like the scrappy kind of throw down. Okay, we've got this thing we have to deal with, we have to fight, we have to go against the institution, what have you, and we're going to do that intelligently. Whether it is a guy or a chick or whoever, it's not as siloed in those categories as it sometimes is in other, maybe like middle of the bell curve science fiction fantasy. It's like, oh, this chick's going to kick your ass, and she's going to do it with something she scrapped together with whatever was out in her shed. It kind of puts them together into one kind of synergistic whole.
And with style. She's going to kick your ass style. With the thing and with style.
Very true. With some mad style. Yeah.
A lot of the ladies' fashion in steampunk that I've seen involves corsets. So I'm curious how she's moving and breathing at the same time.
Do you know they're actually not that bad if they fit properly?
Right.
You're going to get a corset lecture out of that with that's a big...
That's a thing.
We could go down that rabbit hole for a long time, but yeah,
a good corset is better than modern.
Yes, yes, it is.
Also true.
Having never worn one, I will take your word for it. I will smile and nod, and we will move on.
Well, there's a difference between properly fit and not. That makes all the difference.
Well, the popular media depicts them as, I can't breathe. It takes 3 people to lace them into it, and it like breaks their ribs and all that. So, I mean, for most men, that's all we know. So, but you can't picture steampunk without a guy with a monocle and gears on his hat and a woman in a corset. They almost are like required for the aesthetic visually.
And the corset's on the outside.
Yes, because that's
where
how you do it, right?
It does not belong in the slightest, but... Of course, it's for underwear. They were not supposed to be on the top, but that's again the aesthetic of it. Is
The iconography is indelibly marked for everybody. There's no overriding it.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to believe that they wear them on the outside because that just looks cool. So we're just going to go with it.
I mean, it does.
Victorian era, but sexy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Without all the prudishness and ankles. Oh my.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, and different fabrics, because proper corsetry would have been made out of fabrics that they don't. When you look at the aesthetics, that's the wrong fabric. When we dress up and we do cosplay, the fabrics we're using for those exterior corsets, they're totally the wrong fabrics. The boning is not always correct, all of those kinds of things, because now it's for the aesthetic, it's not actually for functionality.
Are you telling me they didn't wear leather corsets?
What?
Are you telling me they didn't wear leather corsets? How dare you lie to us?
Leather doesn't breathe, man.
Okay, so I have seen for men, aside from the monocles and the hat with the gears, sometimes they wear the bolo, which is like the string tie, and sometimes they wear like Jay's wearing, which is the bigger tie. Do you guys have a preference?
Ascot.
The ascot.
Cravat and ascot and all the things.
I've also got a bow tie with a gear on it.
Well, that's nice. You have to show us in pictures next time.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you? You were saying, Chloe?
Everything I learned about cravats, I learned from Gil Carriger.
She is so delightful.
I mean, is there a better place?
No,
Search
really
me.
isn't.
I don't know.
I mean, the little bolo ties. I always looked at those, and my grandfather owned one, and he says, you know why you don't wear these? Because it's way too easy for someone to grab those strings and push up till you can't breathe anymore.
It's a
And that was the end of any of my characters who wanted to live wearing one, because it's like, yeah, he's got a point. That's a really good way to just garrote yourself. So move right away from that.
I heard that FBI agents wear clip-on ties. I might.
Yeah.
All law enforcement wear clip-on.
I wore one in the Army, and if they asked, that was my reasoning. So I was more combat effective. Not that we ever went to combat in our dress uniform, but that was my justification anyway.
No,
you could have.
They're Class A's. They're formal Class A's. Law enforcement. They're all clip-ons for that reason.
Interesting.
Because strangling to death is a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like breathing. I'm pretty good at it. Been doing it for a while, so yeah, I get it. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about common themes. What about tropes? Do you think there are tropes that work best in a steampunk setting, or can you just use any of them?
The self-rescuing damsel.
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
Just the girl who is up to her neck in trouble and stuck on her own and tied up and all in the trouble. And by the time anybody actually gets to her, she's armed and prepared. And that's just such a fun, because it's got that intrepid find a tool and use it mentality that, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yes.
Okay. What about everyone else? Any other tropes that you think work really well in steampunk?
A lot of it, exploration, those forbidden frontiers and things like that. I mean, this is, again, the time of the American West, the time of the expansion. It's pulling off of those years where everybody was looking for what's over the next horizon, and whether you're getting there by dirigible or how it is you're getting there. Steampunk really embraces a lot of those themes of that next frontier in technology, that next frontier in alchemy, that next frontier in places we're going to go. It's that very intrepid spirit and always pushing that envelope.
I think a lot of modern readers, if they pay attention to the news, can relate to that now more than ever as we watch the next space race starting. Mm-hmm. And, you see Elon Musk with SpaceX and Blue Origin and all those other companies that are from other countries, because I think Russia, Italy, I think Japan is doing some stuff in space now. China is. So I think if you look at that, you can kind of grasp that the world is our oyster. What's next kind of feeling.
Put more gears on the outside of those ships and we're good. Just clunk them on, because then it would look cool.
Hot glue, stick them, we're done. Mm-hmm.
I will say for a trope that I've seen, because I've watched some of the movies, like Dust made a bunch of them, the YouTube channel made a bunch of like steampunk vibed of their shorts. And the idea that with a big enough hammer, you can solve all problems, because when something doesn't work, just bang on the like the pipes with a hammer, and suddenly everything starts working again. Sure. I tried that with
maintenance.
Didn't work. But aggressive maintenance, yes, that's what we'll call that trope.
Percussive.
It's percussive maintenance.
We'll take both. So, does anybody else have other tropes that they think really, really shine in a steampunk aesthetic?
Go, Isaac. I can see you thinking about it.
There's a hidden weapon trope that steampunk does really well, with their daggers and their miniature swords and their poisons and all of these hidden weapons that become relevant over the course of the story.
Okay. And Isaac, you had something to say. I can see.
Thinking back to the third Back to the Future, we're with the Old West, and Doc Brown does steampunk.
Okay, you're right.
Everything runs on steam. He makes a refrigerator out of cast iron and steam.
He definitely replaced his DeLorean with a train.
Yes.
So yeah, I would say it's definitely steampunk.
Yeah. No
If you go-
gasoline, no plutonium. It's steam and magnets.
All right, Chloe, make your Chekhov reference.
No, she said on the side chat that it's Chekhov's stiletto. Steampunk has a Chekhov stiletto, and I wanted to say it and didn't.
You totally should have, because it's totally true.
You have to have the stiletto show up in the first act and then use it in the third.
Yep.
I was going to say, if you ever go back and watch the original Wild Wild West TV series, that's definitely got the flavor and all the tropes, except for maybe the Victorian England references, I guess, so much. But yeah, that's a great one.
Well, can you really put any trope off the table, though, with how wide the steampunk net is?
No.
I mean, seriously, it's probably one of the most inclusive in terms of, like, tropes. Because it touches every other identified genre.
Yeah, it's more of kind of a setting. I mean, you can say, yes, there's the aesthetic feel to it that makes it more or less steampunk to many readers, but really it's, you've got everything from steampunk horror to, it could be, we could do Star Trek and steampunk easily.
Mm-hmm. No, it has tropes that it favors, but it can swallow any of them. Good phrasing.
Okay. So obviously, we kind of have an idea in our head, and we've talked about the broad strokes of what is steampunk. Would you live in a steampunk world if you could?
Ooh. I like to think I'm smart. I don't know if I'm that smart. I am blonde, after all.
Are we talking steampunk West? Are we talking steampunk England? Are we talking...
England.
Let you decide and then tell us about it.
If I had to pick one to be in, it'd be England for sure. Wild West has never tickled my fancy as much as some others, steampunk or otherwise. So England, 100%.
Okay. Jenny?
I'd give it a go. Especially if I could have, like daggers hidden everywhere. Give it a go.
Okay. What about you, Jay? If you could live in any of the steampunk worlds, would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, as addicted as I am to the modern world and addicted to air conditioning, I'm sure I could figure out some way to have automatons that do the fans to keep me cool. So I think it's a much more optimistic worldview. Usually, again, it can swallow any sort of tropes, but it seems it's a fairly optimistic world with a lot of potential dangers too. But I think it'd be fun.
And fewer
electronics. I've got a perfect solution to your lack of air conditioning. You ready for this? I'm going to blow your mind. Airship. You're high enough in the air that it's a little bit cooler, and you're moving so the wind is in your face. Boom. I'm a problem solver.
Sell me a ticket, man.
What about you, Jenna? Would you or Jenny or Jenna? Would you
We'd give it a shot. We'd definitely give it a shot, because the idea of doing the whole airship pirate, I could get into that. I get right around in a ship, and I get to attack people that I don't like and take their stuff.
Bring it on.
I see no bad here.
I'd crew with you.
Yeah.
See? Gather my little crew of gals, and we'd putter around.
What about you, Isaac? What about you, Isaac? You gonna go steampunk with us? We'll start a pirates band.
Okay, but what's the catch?
There was a catch. I'm asking you if you would live in a steampunk world.
Probably. Sure, why not?
At least give it a 3-day try.
Sure. All right. What about you, Chloe?
It's a little bit like asking Doc if he'd rather live in the Old West or the 80s. And you like to think that you'd thrive there and you'd have a great time. But at the end of the day, I really like all of the modern convenience. And I'm going to go with the pragmatic answer, y'all. I kind of like it here and now a little bit better.
Okay. So we've talked about some examples of steampunk. Have you guys seen the movie? I haven't read the series yet, but Shadow and Bone that they made. Was it of like they moved a couple of book series into one TV show? Would you count that as steampunk, given some of the machines they used to fly around were steam powered? It appeared.
I think if they had framed it differently, it would have been there. All of the pieces were there, but the framing was a bit more of a frontier and the lack of resources and the struggle that goes into it, rather than the building the boat that's going to fly across the giant black clouds. All the bits were there, but I'm not sure that that's how they put them together.
Okay. Anybody else have opinions if you've seen that show?
It felt more like not Earth. So
yeah, it's
secondary
world fantasy, really.
Yes, that what she said. Much better than I said.
Can secondary world fantasy also be steampunk?
I would argue it's gas lamp.
I mean, it could, but I agree with Chloe that this one didn't.
Okay. Gas lamp, go on, Chloe.
I would argue that this is gas lamp, where it has all of the technology and all of the advancement and all of the cultural structures of the gas lamp era of Victorian Europe. And it put it in a second world, and it gave it a whole new cultural background and a whole new narrative. But the people there you recognize because they behave the way that people in a gas lamp universe should behave. So I would call it a slam dunk on gas lamp, and it had some steampunk elements, but it's squarely for me a gas lamp fantasy.
Okay,
Chloe wins.
Steampunk is known for many of the gadgets and the tech and the vibe. So what is the one thing you like the most that you see in steampunk? And so, for instance, I like the air power ships because I grew up wanting to be a Rocketeer. I was very disappointed to find out those weren't real. So for me, I always loved the airships. But what about everyone else? Is there any one gadget or tech or thing from steampunk that speaks to you?
I'm with you, and I'm with the airships.
All right, what about you?
Clothes.
Clothes?
I like the shoes and the hats and the construction that goes into, yes, the external corsets are a joke, but they're fun.
They're pretty.
They're fun. And they're so detailed and intricate and functional. And I like the clothes a lot.
Okay. What about you, Isaac?
I like the gear. The magnifying glasses, the goggles, even when it's Morse code, all the tech and cutting edge stuff in a world that don't see that stuff yet.
Okay. All right, Terry.
I'm going to be a little bit more specific on the clothing gadget front. Those little teacup and plate holders. I want one. And I don't even drink tea. I just think they're cool looking and functional if you make them right.
Okay. Does Jenny, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I've got kind of a shock. I've got an off the wall answer because I like how it's not archaeology.
Architecture.
That, yes. See, well, you already speak, Jenny. This is amazing. So, the architecture gives this really comfortable kind of dark, gritty, but not dark kind of feel where you feel kind of comfortably closed in, but in a way that you have total control over. And you've got the pipes and the beams and everything that you can construct. It's not brick. It's not a one and done. You can reconstruct it. You can change and adapt as you grow, as you need. And then when you pair that with the transportation, oh, I'm sorry, I just got 2 dogs. Now I need to add 2 wheels on the back of my bike instead of the one. You can do it. So it's adaptable based on what you need. Plus, I got to agree, the corsets are badass. I'm just saying. I mean, you can't not say that.
I tried to wear one and everyone pointed and laughed, so I'll leave it to the ladies.
it wasn't fitted properly, was it?
Yeah.
Really?
There are corsets meant for men, and they're very, very good for your back problems.
Yes.
You just have to be fitted
Okay.
properly.
I make a
So
joke.
I'll
and she
toss
gets
one in there,
serious.
JR.
Go on.
Weaponry. I adore the weaponry that comes out of steampunk because you have early prototypes for laser guns and plasma guns and who knows what else. I mean, lightning guns. You get cool things going on here, and swords that come out of canes. And I mean, I love the weaponry, and I love how creative it gets, and the
And the
different
little
ways
claw
that
hands that
things
come
are.
in and
Yes, little claw hands, and there's just really awesome things that you can do with the weaponry that comes out of steampunk.
If you want to see what creativity can happen in a steampunk setting, I will argue that the contraptions that they had in the Goonies that he was making would very easily could work in steampunk because the way he was making them.
It's true.
And the claw hands made me think of that because he had all his magic backpack with all the stuff.
And slick shoes.
Yes. And the truffle shuffle, but we'll move on. So who here has written steampunk? So Jenny, I'm going to go around and everyone that's written, can you tell us a little bit about your steampunk and where people can find it, what it's called? So that way, because I mean, we're butting up against time, but those of you that have written it, it's a good chance to pimp it out. So Jenny, tell us about your steampunk.
Well, I've got one that's out. We've got a Corner Scribblers collection that's out that's steampunk that has like 10 of us in it. So that's out there on the Three Ravens. It's also out on Amazon. So if you want like a 90-minute read for steampunk, it's there. I've got one in it. Isaac does. My steampunk novel is still sitting in Hillbilly's queue. It's fabulous. Just love it because he keeps kicking it back to me and telling me it shouldn't be one book, it should be 9. And that makes me quiver under my desk and suck my thumb and rock.
That happens.
Oh,
But
in there.
Yes, it does. It makes me quiver and suck my thumb and rock. And he threatens to drag me out by my hair, and it's a thing. But I have a new world. Like, it's created a new world. So I've got like all the tech, and I've got my characters are like a combination of first responders and military because they literally lead the charge and they go out, and I've created a toxic environment. I don't know why. My brain just wrote that it was a toxic environment. I don't know. It just did. So I've got them going out on these adventures on the land, and I've got pirates, and I've got they have respirators, and of course that creates its own set of problems that I get to play with, and land cruisers, and I've got them as their miners who collect. Of course, then I get to open the whole world of all the minerals and things out there that there isn't one I want. I'm gonna make one because I can do that. So it's sitting in queue, and apparently I'm gonna have to fight him and figure out how to make 1 into 9.
So instead of rocking under your desk, sucking your thumb, what you clearly need is Isaac to come partner with you because he's also written steampunk, and you can co-write this mofo, and then you don't have to stress out.
Have you met Hillbilly? He calls me and goes, "Hey, where's my novel?"
I know. All right, Jay, you said you've written some steampunk. Can you tell us about it?
Well, it's actually several steampunk short stories, kind of not all necessarily set in the same setting. So I've got, it's different magazines and anthologies, and it's kind of a list, about 8 or so. I've got a couple in the, there's an anthology of Mormon steampunk that, where I've got one that takes place at the Chicago Expo in 1892 or whatever, and because that was the introduction of the world's first Ferris wheel, and I had to have it culminate with a fist fight on top of that moving Ferris wheel, on top of one of the cars, which could hold like 100 people each. So it's just fun. So anyway, short stories and Terra Mechanica. I've got several others, Story Hack. Short stories, lots. I can't even remember where they all are.
So wait, Mormon steampunk is a thing too?
It was actually, there was like 4 volumes in it, and it's won awards. You didn't have to be Mormon to write it, but it was just steampunk involving, because the Mormon Church, LDS Church, also came about around the beginning of the Victorian era, and they said, "Hey, this sounds like some interesting stuff. I'm sure there's Catholic steampunk and there's Indian steampunk and lots of others out there. So that was fun. But yeah, there's one Dave Butler had one where they kind of created a Frankenstein monster of Brigham Young that they fed his old talks into, and it would be an automaton and recite those back. And anyway, just bizarro stuff, tons of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Color me intrigued. I'm gonna link that one in the show notes, dear listener, and the Corn Scribblers. I don't know why you would name a book about writing with corn stalks, but whatever you do. And of course, we will link to Jay Barnson's website and his Amazon, so you can check out his stories there. Anything that's available there, you'll be able to find across all of his many publications. Chloe, have you written any steampunk?
I haven't. It's very tempting and it's out there, but right now I've restrained myself to the gas lamp fantasy stuff.
Okay.
It will probably happen one of these days, but it isn't on my list today.
I'm writing a fantasy series with James Ward that involved automatons, and it's not steampunk, but by doing the research on all the brass automatons, because like Skyrim had was it Skyrim, I think, had a lot
the
of
Elder
them?
Scrolls.
Yeah, the Elder Scrolls. And so it got me thinking, and I keep wanting to come back to playing with automatons, and what a better setting for that than steampunk. But I have open contracts I have to finish before I start new stuff, because publishers get really mad when you're late. So I feel your pain, Chloe. So Jenna, have you written any steampunk yet?
I have 2 short stories that are on the hard drive and need to be edited and find a home for at some point, but they've been backburnered for like 3 years. So I enjoy reading the genre. I enjoy the aesthetics. I enjoy watching the shows. One day those will crawl to the top of the pile, and I'll see if I can find a home for them. Nice.
Isaac, I know you've written one. Tell me about the short story you wrote for the Corn Scribbling Three Ravens anthology.
Well, it's sort of like it's the argument of it's sort of like superheroes, only it's steampunk. The character that I made, he made a machine, like a backpack, that can take him into alternate dimensions, and it's 1800s, and it's what makes it work is cylinders and gears, and it's in a cast iron body, and he winds up meeting the wrong guy, who is the moderator of this one dimension, and winds up getting it smashed and winds up in a cave, and then he winds up meeting the one guy who's able to help him, who has a beef with this moderator, and that's when the steampunk elements came into life in that story, because he helps him put it back together with the gears and replacing the water, which is not available, with making the atmosphere into a liquid, but only native to that dimension, enabling him to return to his home dimension, but at a terrible price, with the moderator's warning.
Okay. Sounds interesting, and we'll link to that anthology so people can check it out. Terry, I know that you're a baby author, so you don't have a lot out yet, so I'm going to guess no on the published anthologies. But have you narrated any steampunk?
Not really, no. Everything I've done so far has been somewhere on the spectrum of fantasy, urban fantasy. I have an idea for a short story that I think would probably end up drifting into steampunk in one way or another, but it is still in the brain cooking stage.
See, now I'm tempted to do another, because we've got like 4 planned of the J.R. Handley Presents anthology series that Hillbilly convinced me to do. I don't know how that happened. He got me talking about moonshine and mead, and he was going to send some. And before I knew it, I said yes. And he's like, "Oh, well, maybe the moonshine can come later. The mead can come later." I'm like, "Wait, what did I just agree to?"
That's called getting hillbilly. You got hillbilly.
There's a verb for this.
So apparently, I need to add add steampunk to one of the future
That'd be so fun.
anthologies just to have a reason. Like, all right, so
Said it out loud. There's no backing out now. I can tell.
I've had
Now we're
people
gonna have
ask me-
steampunk assault, because there are others in Mills SF, so we could steampunk Mill SF. That'd be fun.
Yeah, well, I've been asked to plan a Coast Guard themed one, because you could have coasties in space, and I've actually got a story already done, so I could probably justify it because I'm not actually doing any extra work because my minions do the back end stuff. So maybe I can add steampunk to the end of the year.
That'd be awesome.
All right, I'm going to talk to you, Hillbilly. You guys did it. It's all your fault. I'm going to blame Chloe when the minions start complaining about my schedule being already full. And we'll just get, like, you know, we could throw a little bit of Mormon steampunk in there just because why not? Because Jay wrote it. We can too.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got definitely room to come back to with the gas lamp and the diesel punk and atom punk and all the punks. Although if we call it all the punks, they're going to think we're talking music. And then we're going to be protesting something because that's what they used to do before punk became corporate. I don't know when that happened. But we will come back for those. In the meantime, we're going to go just sort of round robin. You can tell us all where we can find you. So we're going to start with you, Miss Terry J. Okay, well, hold up. We're going to retry that. Terry Joe. Woo, I can speak.
Words, how do they work? Let's get Terry K. Joe, but most commonly found on the Facebook, and maybe somewhere else in the future. Ooh.
Okay. And next we got Miss Jenny E. Wren, who is only on one place on the internet because she's been banned from all the rest. Can you tell us where that is?
Yep, I have an Amazon author page for Jenny E. Wren, and the rest of it, me not being there, is because I want to keep everything working for everybody else because I respect everyone else too much to destroy them.
Destroy nice of you.
We appreciate your benevolence.
Thank you. And John Connor's got nothing on me. If he had me, Skynet would have been a non-issue.
Ooh, that makes you wonder, could you do a Rise of the Terminator in a steampunk setting?
Are you kidding?
Oh, yeah.
See, you guys are bad for my calendar and my sanity, but all right, Jay.
jbarnson.com, and also on the Amazon page, probably if you're interested in the books. Also, Rampant Coyote on Twitter is probably where I'm most active most of the time.
Nice. We appreciate it. We will stalk you as you do. Next, we have Miss Jenna S. Brown, sometimes known as Jenna Ray or Chuck Tingle or all the other pseudonyms.
You're not
I'm sorry.
supposed to tell.
It's a secret.
Hush. I'm not telling you secrets anymore. My goodness. You can find me at opalkingdompress.com or on Amazon or on Facebook under Jenna Ray or Janet S. Brown or Jadlyn Asher or...
We'll censor that. We'll censor that out. You're okay. All right, and I will link to all this, obviously, in the show notes. Mr. Isaac Kraft, can you tell listeners and viewers where they can find you on the wild, wild interwebs? Because I expect big things from you, sir.
I've got Isaac Kraft Amazon author page, and I can be found on Facebook.
All right, and he has all the other things. I'll link those too because I stalk him before, as you do in show prep. And that's our goal for 2024 is the Three Ravens goal is to get him to talk more. So you can help us by encouraging conversation with him on his platforms. So just reach out, tell him JR sent you. He'll love you forever. It's a thing, I'm sure. Last but not least, we have the lovely Miss Chloe. Can you tell listeners and viewers where they can find you?
Absolutely. You can find me at chloegarner.com for my personal thoughts on writing and what's going on. I'm on Facebook, but if you want to find me on Facebook, the place to do it is my Facebook group, which I will make sure that JR's got the link to that in the show notes this time because I am giving away Verita merchandise at the end of February to everybody who signs up for it on my Facebook group. So I've got a link to it on my website, and we'll have a link to it here for this one as well. And come play. It's a good place.
All right. And with that being said, this is the time where I remind you to Do your part to the writing community. Please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. And in those reviews, when you go to review the Corn Scribbler or the Mormon anthology, make sure you tell them that JR and the Blasters of Blade sent you, and that you want volume whatever's next, because why not? I mean, you've got the platform. Speak, use your voice. Dear listener, dear viewer. And with that being said, you can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the bit shoots, the rumbles, the YouTubes, the Twitters, the email for professional business purposes only at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. You can find our Facebook group and our Facebook page. And most importantly, you can find Madam Stabby Stab on her Instagram, Twitter, and email, where all the hate and discontent can go. She likes it when you send her hate mail. So do your part. And if you want to be really mean, tell her that pineapple goes on pizza. She will cry in Italian tears, I am sure. And if Nick gets stabbed because of this, it's Isaac's fault, because reasons. And you can also find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters-blades. Again, anchor.fm/blasters-blades, where for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. These episodes aren't free to produce, so we appreciate your patronage. If you want to support the show more directly, you can support us over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and I will promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until the Java pours out of their eyeballs, and then we'll film it for science. Speaking of science, if you want scientifically produced coffee, I don't know if there's, I mean, it's chemicals, right? It's got to be some science. But we are an affiliate vendor for Coffee Brand Coffee, where we have all the things, the coffees, the teas, the hot cocos, which we all know and love. Their hot cocoa, by the way, pairs very well with Jana's fudge. If you listen to one of our first episodes for the season, you'll see me a little bit on a sugar high. It was her fault. We blame her.
I
It
win.
was delicious. But use the code PODCASTGRUNTS with the link below, and you get 10% off. You save money, you help an American company. It's a win-win, people. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy and absent co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, and Isaac, we appreciate you coming to visit. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. Boom. All right, wait for